This is the real reason why the Israeli government wants to focus the debate around genocide and not war crimes. War crimes is something that's very easy, much more easy to prove than genocide, which is a legal definition under international law. And in this video, I want to go into what that definition is and why the Israeli government wants the debate to be about genocide and not war crimes. Genocide is a legal definition under international law and has two parts to it. The first part are one of five physical acts need to be carried out. And the other part is there must be an intention to destroy either the whole group or part of a group. And when we say group, we mean a racial group, an ethnic group, a religious group. So if there is an intention to destroy either part or whole of that ethnic, racial, religious group, and they carry out one of five actions, then that, by the legal definition under international law, is genocide. But the problem is how to prove the intention. That is extremely difficult to prove when there is a military objective. If you have a military objective, then even if you kill 1,000 people, 10,000, 50,000 people, as long as there is a military objective and you can prove that this is necessary, the killing of civilians was necessary in order to achieve an objective and it was just, then you cannot really prove that you had an intention to destroy the group because your intention was to deal with the military objective and activity that's happening in a particular area. And that is the kind of the get out of jail card that some groups use in order to avoid those actions being labeled as genocide or resulting in genocide. Here's the definition. These are the five physical actions. If any of them are carried out and there's an intention to destroy the group, then it's genocide. One is killing members of the group. Second is causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, or forcibly transferring children of a group to another group. Now, even if you can prove any of these have happened, for example, you would say that restricting food and water to enter into Gaza is causing, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction over time. So even if actually very little deaths occur, but you are creating an environment that's going to cause the destruction of the group in whole or in part, slowly over time, that could be considered as one of the actions. Or killing members of the group, such as killing lots of civilians, then that would be considered. But you could do all those things, and still it's not considered as genocide because you have to prove that there is an intention to destroy that group. And how do you prove an intention? Well, you would look at what they have carried out, the statements that they've done, whether there's a process that is that shows there's an intention to destroy the group in whole or in part. But that is nearly impossible to do when there's a military objective, because you could always say, even if you kill, with one bomb, 400 civilians, that it was necessary and it was just given the military advantage that this would give you as the party that's carrying out this attack. So as long as there's a military objective, it's not genocide. And even in the example where, for example, there's 4 ambulances coming and you kill all of them and they're all civilians, there's no military activity, turns out, you could still say that we had information that indicated that there was some military activity. And so based on that, we carried out those attacks. And then that shows that there wasn't an intention to destroy a group. The intention was to carry out a military objective, even if there wasn't actually in the end any military activity. Given that you had information and you are allowed to act on that information, the issue is no one can really investigate that because that group can always say, well, we had information. We had spies on the ground that indicated to us that there was that kind of information and we acted on that information. You can't really look into that as an external party. The only party that can look into it is Israel itself or the group that's carrying out those activities. And that's how you get out of genocide. Very simple. So the fact that there is a military objective muddies the water when it comes to that definition. And so it's very hard to prove genocide legally from a legal term, even if you're killing 100,000 people, civilians. And that is why the conversation and the debate is being framed purposely on genocide. And I feel like people are falling into that trap when the conversation should more focus on war crimes because it doesn't have that requirement to destroy a group in part or in whole. It depends more on the actions that you're taking without the need for that specific intention to prove that genocide. And even if you made some statements, like some Israeli leaders did, which is we're going to kill a lot of people, we're going to slaughter them, or we're going to deny them water and food, these statements are not really that much proof when it comes to the international law, because you need more than just statements. You need actual evidence that they are intending to destroy the group, not just what they said, but their action resulting in that destruction or that intention to destroy that group. And if there is a military objective in court, that's what will be used to say the intention wasn't to destroy the group, but actually it was a military objective. The other argument that I hear a lot is that if Israel wanted to destroy the group, it would have just nuked them. Israel has nukes, so it could just destroy the whole place in just one press of a button. The issue is we need to separate what Israel is capable of doing, what a group is capable of doing, and whether they're able to do it from a political perspective. If a country like Israel nukes Gaza, then politically that would be suicide. No country would deal with Israel anymore. It would be sanctioned. There would be no supply of anything to Israel. It would be like Iran, essentially, closed off from the whole world, and it'd have to rely on itself. And that would just, really maybe destroy, maybe not destroy, but actually hinder the growth of that country. And it would take years for it to recover from such an action. So even though Israel is capable of doing that, politically, it's suicide if it actually carries out such actions. So that's not really an option for it to carry out. So then we go to war crimes. What are the war crime actions where it doesn't actually require an intention to destroy a group whole or in part? So you don't need to prove that intention to destroy a group, but you need to prove an intention to do other things. And I'll go into the definition right now. And before I go into the definition, I just want to say that I believe that Hamas did commit genocide and have committed war crimes against Israelis. For me, that's not up to debate. What I'm debating is what Israel has done. The other part, I believe they have carried out those things. So when it comes to the definition of war crimes, if these actions are carried out, I'm going to go through them, in a military kind of occupation, then they can be considered as war crimes. So the willful killing, this is part of the Geneva Convention. The first one is willful killing. When you drop a 2,000-pound bomb in a densely populated area, which will kill hundreds of civilians, because remember, Gaza is so compact, it's very hard to argue that that was necessary when you drop 2,000-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs, especially when you have the capability of precise missile attacks that doesn't cause that much damage. Yet bombs were dropped, and Israel will say that we had information, but still, they have to make the decision whether that, the casualties that will create is proportionate and will give them a military advantage for them to carry out such an attack that will kill so many civilians. And in a lot of cases, they were not able to provide any evidence that there was a military objective. And so, in so many cases, that shows that there was willful killing. The torture and inhumane treatment, there's a lot of evidence now coming out of the torture that's happening in Israeli prisons. Most people don't know that a lot of children and other people are put in prisons without charge, without a conviction for years. And that's illegal. And they are tortured in there, which has resulted in a lot of deaths in Israeli custody and sexually abused. That's a war crime. Extensive destruction of property, not justified by military necessity. When you drop that many bombs that destroys more than 70% of buildings in Gaza, in a place, that causes 90% of people to be homeless. I don't know any other war that's created 90% of the population to be homeless in just 2 years. Back in World War II, they didn't have the bombs that we have today that can be precise. And yet still we don't have evidence of 90% of the population being homeless in just 2 years. It's insane. And it's very hard to justify that militarily, to say that that was necessary and gave them an advantage. Compelling a prisoner of war or other protected person to serve in the forces of the hostile power. We have seen videos of Israeli forces putting Gazans and people in West Bank on their vehicles as protection. We hear a lot about human shields, how Hamas uses human shields, but the IDF does it. The IDF uses actual human shields and puts them on the car to protect themselves. And then the human shields point becomes a moot point when you're destroying whole places. buildings, like whole areas of buildings being destroyed, the whole human shields point becomes ridiculous. Because what's the point of a human shield and making the point that they're using human shields when you're destroying not specific one building destruction, but 20, 30 building destructions in one go. Killing or wounding combatants who have laid down their arms or having no longer means of defense has surrendered at discretions. We have so much evidence of Israeli forces shooting at civilians that clearly have no weapons. They have shot their own hostages who were holding a white flag, thinking they were not hostages. That is a war crime. The transfer, directly or indirectly, by the occupying power of parts of its own civilian population into territory it occupies. This happens in West Bank and has been happening for decades. Israel occupied West Bank in 1967. It's under military occupation since then, recognized by the majority of countries. It has allowed Israeli settlers to go into West Bank and create outposts where they live. Now, this is not, they say indirectly or indirectly. They're indirectly allowing these settlers, Israeli settlers, to go into West Bank and create those outposts. And after time, what they do is they recognize them as settlements. Both the outposts and the settlements, which are outposts become settlements after some time, and then you can build actual concrete housing and villages that are occupied by Israeli settlers. That's illegal under international law and is a war crime. There are now nearly 500,000 settlers in the West Bank. And so, as you can see, there are a lot of evidence of war crimes committed by the Israeli government and Israeli forces. And this is the reason why the Israeli government doesn't want us to talk about war crimes and is focusing on the genocide point, because the war crime isn't really debatable. And it's so much more easy to prove as opposed to genocide, which has a very strict legal definition under international law, and it's nearly impossible to prove intention to destroy a group in whole or in part when there is a military objective. I'd love to know your thoughts on whether we should still continue talking about genocide or focus more on war crimes, whether you don't think that genocide or war crimes are being committed. And if you did like this video, then do hit the like or subscribe and do follow us. Have a great day.